What if I told you that the most powerful move you can make isn't chasing her, arguing, or proving your worth, but quietly walking away without a word, not out of spite, not as a tactic, but because you've finally understood something deeper, that your silence carries more weight than your explanations ever could. When you disappear without a noise, you don't just leave a space behind you, create emotional contrast. The absence of your energy forces her to confront something she never had to, the cost of your presence, and suddenly, what felt ordinary starts to feel rare. In the psychology of attraction, uncertainty is magnetic. The human mind obsesses over what it can't define, can't predict. Your quiet exit breaks the pattern. It unsettles her expectations, and the man who once seemed easy to access, he becomes a mystery, a question, a presence she now has to earn back. This isn't about manipulation, it's about mastery. Walking away is no longer an emotional reaction. It's a spiritual return to yourself. And in that stillness, she begins to feel what your words could never make her feel, the loss of your certainty. If you're ready to reclaim your value in silence, hit like, subscribe, and comment. I don't chase, I choose. Now, let's begin. Number 1, the silence that spoke louder than you ever could. Right now, your absence may be echoing in her world louder than any message you ever sent. No more checking your phone for her reply. No more asking, did I say the wrong thing? You've stepped back not to punish her, but to reclaim your center. And in that stillness, your silence becomes the loudest sound she hears. This is the paradox. Men are taught to act, to chase, to clarify, to close every gap in conversation. But the Stoic man understands something deeper. Not every space is meant to be filled. In fact, some of the most powerful impressions are made when you say nothing at all. When you withdraw from constant presence, you stop being the background noise she's grown used to. Suddenly, there's a pause where your name once lived, a space where your attention once waited, and that space becomes her mirror. Why hasn't he reached out? Did he finally let go? Did I matter at all? You've created what Stoics call restraint, not weakness, but wisdom. Marcus Aurelius reminds us. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. You don't retaliate. You don't chase closure. You embody control. And control, when paired with silence, is terrifyingly memorable. This isn't about mind games, it's about clarity. You stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened with intent. You stopped proving your worth to someone who only valued your availability. You became the man who no longer needs to announce his value, because his absence announces it for him. Here's the shift. You no longer react emotionally when she distances herself. You don't rush in to fill the gap. You allow it. You let her feel the absence. And in that permission, you protect your dignity. Your silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself not to beg. Psychologically, this triggers something primal. The brain seeks patterns. And when a man who once showed up vanishes without drama, the pattern breaks. Confusion follows. Reflection follows. Your silence plants questions in her mind that words never could. And while she's stuck analyzing your stillness, you're busy growing, healing, building. The man she once thought would always be there is now the man she can't stop thinking about, not because he's loud, but because he's gone without needing to be chased. So no, your silence isn't passive. It's calculated stillness. It's the thunder that follows after you stop speaking. It's the dignity that grows in the space she never thought you'd leave, empty. If you've ever let silence speak your truth better than words could, drop this below. I didn't explain, I disappeared with dignity. Number 2, the magnetic mystery of the man who no longer chased. She was used to a certain rhythm, your presence on demand, your messages, your reassurance, your predictable attention. It was comforting for her, but it was draining for you. And then, something changed. You stopped being instantly available. You stopped reacting. And suddenly, the story she had about you fell apart. Now, she doesn't know where you stand. And that, ironically, is where your power begins. When you remove yourself from the chase, you become unpredictable, not in a chaotic way, but in a composed, deliberate one. You no longer orbit her moods. You're not pressed to respond within minutes or explain your silence. You've moved into a different posture, one of emotional self-respect. The kind Stoicism teaches at its core, Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And you've stopped performing. You've stopped living in emotional reaction to someone else's inconsistency. Instead, you've stepped into restraint, into self-mastery. And the moment you did, something unexpected happened. You became a mystery. Because when a man who once sought her validation suddenly becomes still, without bitterness, without announcement, he triggers something primal, curiosity. Where did he go? Why isn't he reacting? Has he outgrown this? And that mystery is magnetic. You're no longer the man she can read like a script. You're not angry, but you're unavailable. You're not cold, but you're detached. You're present in your own life now, in your focus, in your progress. You've stopped trying to be understood by someone who doesn't even understand her own actions. This is not indifference, it's redirection. In practical terms, this means you don't initiate just to be noticed. You don't explain your silence unless it's earned. You don't seek out her energy when you've already seen it deplete yours. You become the man whose world doesn't shrink when someone steps back. It expands. And this shift isn't just felt by her. It's seen by others. You're sharper, clearer, less drained. Your posture speaks before you enter the room. Your silence has weight. And without trying to be attractive, you become it, psychologically. People crave what they don't fully understand. And you've become that puzzle not because you're playing games, but because you've stopped handing out pieces to someone who never tried to solve it. If you've ever become more powerful by pulling back, speak it now. I stopped chasing and became the question she couldn't answer. Number 3, the rarity of the man who chose scarcity over need. You were always there, the reliable reply, the consistent check-in, the steady presence she didn't have to earn. And slowly, she got used to you not as a gift, but as a given, not because you lacked value, but because you gave it away without pause. Until you didn't, you withdrew not with bitterness, but with quiet precision. You stopped offering your energy like it were endless. You stopped showing up when your presence was treated like background noise, and in doing so, you introduced a powerful law. Scarcity increases value. This isn't about pretending to be busy. It's about becoming purposefully rare, because people rarely notice what's constant. It fades into the emotional wallpaper of their lives. But when you remove yourself, when your voice goes silent, your name stops lighting up the screen. Your attention no longer arrives on cue. That absence becomes sharp. The world chases noise, but it remembers what's missing. Epictetus warned us, don't place your value in things outside your control. When you give yourself away constantly, you teach others that your value depends on their acceptance. But when you step back, when you place a boundary around your time, your words, your presence, you declare, I do not need your validation to know my worth. And this declaration echoes. She begins to notice things she once ignored, the way you listened, the way you supported without asking, the way your presence made her feel grounded, because now, that presence is gone. It's not punishment, it's not revenge. It's simply the return of energy back to the man who gave it too freely. In practice, this looks like ending conversations while they still hold energy, taking longer to respond, not as a tactic, but because your life is full, saying no, without guilt. Choosing solitude over attention, choosing direction over distraction, psychologically. This repositions you. You're no longer the always there man. You're now the man whose presence means something, because it's no longer guaranteed. That shift from availability to intentionality changes the way she sees you. From comfort to curiosity. From filler to force. You didn't disappear, you just became selective. And in a world of constant exposure, your rarity makes you unforgettable. If you've ever taken back your presence to protect your power, write this below. I stopped being everywhere so she could feel what it meant when I was gone. Number 4. From always available to the challenge. She can't figure out. You were the dependable one, the first to reach out, the first to make plans, the one who always checked in. You wore your heart on your sleeve, thinking clarity would build a connection. But slowly, your consistency became routine, and routine, no matter how pure, becomes invisible. So you stepped back. You stopped initiating. You stopped reminding her of your place in her life. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started remembering who you are in that pause. The dynamic changed. She was no longer being pursued. She was being observed. The man who once made himself available now moved differently, with restraint, with purpose, with a sense of inner direction that no longer revolved around her reactions. And that shift, that's when attraction reignites not through effort, but through absence. Epictetus taught, "He who needs least is most powerful." And when you stopped needing her presence to feel valuable, you changed the emotional current. You stopped swimming toward her and became the shore she now has to reach. You see, when a man withdraws from the chase, he stops being easy to understand. She can't decode you. You're no longer feeding her ego through constant attention. You're feeding your own growth through quiet evolution. That's the unexpected tension that makes a woman pause. Where did he go? Why isn't he reaching out? Was I wrong about his feelings? And that uncertainty doesn't create distance, it creates desire. Because what's not obvious becomes desirable. What's not explained becomes compelling. This is the transformation from the man who seeks to the man who is sought. Not because you pretended to be busy, but because you became fulfilled in your own solitude. You didn't close the door. You simply stopped knocking. And suddenly, she's the one wondering if you're slipping away, or if she's just now realizing what she had. In practical terms, this looks like investing in your goals, saying less, leaving space in conversations instead of trying to impress, not being cruel, but being calm. You don't push her away, you just stop making her the center of your orbit. Psychologically, it's the reversal of pursuit that shakes her. It breaks the script. It turns her mirror back on itself. And when she sees you walking not toward her, but forward, she starts to question her role in your story. If you've ever stepped back and became the mystery she didn't expect, speak it below. I stopped chasing and became the question she didn't prepare for. Number 5. When she finally felt what you once gave freely. She never had to ask for your presence. It was always there. The good morning texts, the late night check-ins, the offers of support when she didn't even realize she needed them. You gave yourself fully, without hesitation, and for a while, it was appreciated, until it became expected. That's when the shift happened, not in her words, but in her energy. Your kindness began to feel like background noise. Your care became assumed. And slowly, she stopped noticing. Not because you mattered less, but because you were always there, so you stopped being there. You didn't announce your exit. You didn't create drama. You simply withdrew the energy that had once been her comfort. And in that sudden quiet, something unexpected rose to the surface. She began to feel your absence, because what she took for granted has now become scarce. What she dismissed as normal now feels irreplaceable. This is the emotional inversion that Stoic men understand. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. You were once taken lightly because your presence was overestimated, constant, automatic, unshakable. But now, your silence forces her to reassess, not just you, but her own behavior. The space you left behind isn't just emptiness, it's evidence. How much you gave, of how little she noticed, of how valuable you truly were. Psychologically, this hits hard. Humans process loss more deeply when it's tied to guilt or realization. She's not just missing you, she's waking up to the way she overlooked you, the way she swiped past your texts, the way she gave you half attention, the way she assumed you'd always be one more message away. And now you're not. This isn't punishment, it's principle. You withdrew not to make her hurt, but to stop hurting yourself. You stopped performing for someone who stopped clapping. You reclaimed the emotional energy you were pouring into someone who no longer valued its warmth. In practice, this looks like not explaining your silence, not softening the edges of your absence, not waiting for her to notice. You've given enough. Now it's her turn to feel what it's like when that giving ends. And she will, because you weren't just another man in her life. You were the quiet, constant, the peace in the chaos, the presence she never had to ask for until it was gone. If you've ever stepped back and watched someone finally feel your worth in your absence, speak it now. She didn't lose me when I left. She lost me when she stopped noticing I stayed. Number 6. The day you broke her pattern without saying a word. She thought she knew how this would play out. Pull away. And you'd lean in, go silent, and you'd overcompensate, show a little coldness, and you'd come running with warmth. It's not that she was being cruel, it's just that this always worked. Until now. Because this time, you didn't move, you didn't text, you didn't explain. You didn't reach into her emotional storm with open hands, trying to rescue what didn't want saving. Instead, you stayed still, not with spite, but with supreme control. You didn't match her chaos. You held your center, and in doing so, you broke the pattern she thought she could rely on. That moment, it changed everything. Most people operate through emotional conditioning. She pulls, you chase. She pauses, and you panic. This loop creates a power imbalance, but it also creates comfort until someone ends the dance. And when you ended it, not with force, but with quiet authority, she didn't know what to do next. This is what Stoicism calls emotional sovereignty. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When she pulled away, your reaction wasn't desperation, it was discipline. You didn't mirror her energy, you embodied your own. Psychologically, this disrupts her entire perception of you. She expected familiar behavior. What she got was silence, space, a mirror she wasn't ready for. Suddenly, you're no longer reactive, you're unreadable. And what people can't read, they can't control. This is how power shifts without a word being spoken. You didn't yell. You didn't disappear out of spite. You simply chose not to participate in a cycle that cost you your peace. And in that calm withdrawal, you exposed everything. Not just her actions, but her expectations. You let her sit in the silence where your attention used to be, and in that silence, her reflection finally appeared. In practice, this means you don't respond to games with explanations. You don't collapse into her emotional tests. You maintain your pace, your purpose, your posture. You let your stillness create the tension she can no longer predict, and that unpredictability creates desire. This isn't about revenge. It's about recalibration. She no longer sees you as a man she can predict. She sees you as a force she can't quite grasp. And that subtle shift turns you from participant into mystery. If you've ever stayed calm when you were expected to fall apart, write it below. She pulled away expecting chaos. I stayed still and became her confusion. Number 7. The freedom that made you irresistible. She could always feel it, your eyes on her, your energy leaning in, your rhythm shifting whenever she pulled back. You didn't say it out loud, but your actions made it clear. Her attention mattered too much, and that weight, no matter how gentle, became heavy over time. But then you changed. You stopped waiting for the reply. You stopped checking if she'd noticed. You didn't disappear with resentment, you simply stopped needing her presence to justify your peace. And in that moment, your energy shifted. You no longer moved in orbit around her, you moved within your own gravity. And that was the moment she felt your absence, not just physically, but energetically. You see, emotional dependency doesn't always look like desperation. Sometimes it's subtle. The way your mood hinged on her tone, the way your focus scattered when she grew cold, the way you dropped everything to remain visible in her world. It wasn't love, it was survival dressed as connection. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." And that's what you finally did. You looked inward. You saw the man you were without her approval, and he was stronger than you remembered. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. You stopped chasing the highs of her warmth and started building something sustainable within yourself. And while she may not understand why you don't chase anymore, she feels it. She senses that your peace is no longer for sale, that you don't react to her silence with panic, that you are no longer waiting, you are building. In practical terms, this means filling your time with what grows you, the gym, the mission, the craft. You stop checking her status and start checking in with yourself. Your days are no longer dictated by her presence, they are designed by your priorities. Psychologically, this freedom radiates. She feels it when your replies are calm, unhurried, and rooted. She senses the difference not just in what you say, but in what you no longer need to say. And the man who doesn't need, that's the man who attracts. Not because he plays games, but because he plays to win with himself first. And when she comes back around, curious, uncertain, you won't need to act indifferent. You are different. And nothing is more powerful than the man who no longer performs for someone else's recognition. If you've ever stopped needing attention and found your strength in stillness, write this below. I found freedom the moment I stopped needing to be seen. Number 8. Her ego couldn't handle your silence. It wasn't love she missed at first, it was control. You were always there, always responsive. The emotional safety net she never had to earn. Even if she didn't want you fully, she knew you were watching, waiting, reacting. That unspoken power made her feel desired, even if she never planned to reciprocate it. But then, you went quiet. No warning, no explanation. You just stopped giving her something to measure her influence against. You stopped offering your energy like a mirror to her ego. And suddenly, it wasn't your affection she noticed missing, it was her own reflection. That's what silence does. It creates a vacuum, not just of sound, but of attention. And when someone is used to being the center of gravity, even your stillness becomes unbearable. You didn't withdraw to manipulate. You withdrew because you finally understood the emotional toll of being predictable, always reacting, always proving. And in that silence, you sent a message louder than words. You no longer have access to the parts of me you took for granted. Epictetus once said, "Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all." And you embodied it. You didn't clap back. You didn't post stories hoping she'd notice. You simply stopped showing up to validate someone who only valued your presence when it served her image. Psychologically, this triggers a powerful discomfort. It's not heartbreak, it's ego collapse. She was the one who walked away, pulled back, and flirted with absence, but now that you're not reacting, she doesn't know where she stands. Did I lose him? Is he over it? Did he ever care at all? And that spiral isn't about love. It's about uncertainty. The ego hates not knowing. And when the man she thought would always chase suddenly disappears into calm, his silence becomes a question she can't answer. In practice, this looks like ignoring bait. Not explaining yourself when she subtly tests you. Not responding to passive attempts to reclaim your energy. You don't block. You don't argue. You rise, quietly, relentlessly. And as your silence stretches, so does her discomfort. Because now, she has to wonder not just about you, but about herself. Was I that forgettable? Did he move on that easily? Was I never in control at all? You didn't ghost her. You ghosted her ego. And nothing feels heavier to someone used to emotional leverage. If you've ever stayed silent long enough for someone to hear their own emptiness, write this below. She didn't miss me. Her ego missed the control. Number 9. The mirror. You created when you chose to walk away. She didn't think your absence would matter. Maybe she thought you'd come back like you always did. That you'd explain, or ask what went wrong, or try to fix something she never fully valued. But this time, you didn't. You left with silence, and that silence didn't fade, it echoed. And in that echo, something deeper began. Her reflection. Most people don't change in noise. They change in the quiet. When the constant distractions disappear and they're left alone with the consequences of their own behavior, that's what you gave her. Not a reaction, not a confrontation, but a mirror. And few things are more disruptive than being alone with one's unspoken guilt. Stoic philosophy doesn't demand revenge. It demands clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned through life's many sufferings." Your silence wasn't coldness. It was wisdom. You didn't withdraw to teach her a lesson, but she's learning anyway. Because in your absence, she can't hide behind your forgiveness anymore. She can't justify the coldness, the distance, the mixed signals. You're no longer there to take the blame. There's just a stillness now, and it's forcing her to finally ask questions she once avoided. Was I too careless? Did I ignore something real? Did I push him away before I understood what he gave? These aren't questions you prompted. These are questions your absence summoned, and that's what makes your silence powerful. It isn't loud. It's surgical. It doesn't cut her down. It cuts through her illusions. And while she's trying to rewrite the past to make it more comfortable, you've already stepped forward. You're not waiting for her reflection. You're evolving from it. Because the truth is, you didn't leave to be chased. You left because you finally understood your value isn't found in proving it to someone else. In practice, this means not checking in, not circling back to see if she's gotten it yet. You're not the reminder of her mistake. You're the lesson she has to carry now. And that weight, it's heavier than any argument you could have had. Psychologically, you've become associated with growth, her growth. And when someone links you to the person they could have been better with, that impression lingers, not with anger, with gravity. If you've ever walked away and watched someone face their reflection without you, write it now. I didn't leave to hurt her. I left so she could see herself. Number 10. When your absence revealed the man she never fully saw. In the beginning, she had your attention, your time, your energy, your effort. She knew where to find you emotionally, mentally, and often physically. You were consistent, solid, present, but she didn't see the full weight of that presence until it was no longer there. And now, she does. Because your silence isn't just the lack of noise, it's the space where growth happens. You didn't just walk away. You evolved in the distance. You became sharper, calmer, more focused. While she may have been waiting for you to double back, to prove yourself again. What she saw instead was transformation. And that's what stings most, not the loss, but the change she didn't expect. Most people assume that when you leave, you stay the same, that you sit with the pain, that you wait in the wings, that you pause your progress, hoping for a door to reopen. But Stoicism taught you better. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And that's exactly what you've done. You've turned silence into momentum, reflection into power, absence into a stage for your evolution. She didn't feel your absence when you left. She felt it when you stopped explaining, when your energy turned inward, when you began to build without needing to be witnessed. Because there is no greater weight than realizing someone you once dismissed is now becoming everything you secretly wanted, but no longer have access to, in practical terms. This means disappearing not into bitterness, but into discipline. You stopped checking for her. You stopped reacting to breadcrumbs. You turned the time you once spent trying to understand her into time spent mastering yourself. And that mastery, it speaks through your silence, your boundaries, your calm posture, the way you carry yourself in rooms where she's no longer the center of your attention, through the glow of a man who no longer waits to be chosen, because he has already chosen himself. Psychologically, this shifts her perception entirely. You're not the man she left behind. You're the man who moved beyond her, and that realization often comes too late. She thought you'd come back the same. Instead, you became the version of yourself she never got to meet. And that loss, it's not yours. If you've ever let your silence mark the beginning of your evolution, write it below. She didn't lose me when I walked away, she lost me in who I became after. You thought leaving without closure made you weak, but now you understand it made you unforgettable, not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't need to. She expected noise. She expected a plea, an argument, a final message, but you gave her something more powerful, a void. And inside that void, her mind started doing the one thing it had avoided, feeling the weight of losing you. You didn't become irresistible because you disappeared. You became irresistible because you evolved silently, without waiting for her to notice. If you're done proving and ready to start leading, like this video, subscribe and comment. My silence is my answer. Walk away with peace. Let her be the one who hears the silence and feels what she once took for granted.